Hello and welcome to another one of my favorites videos. We have made our way through quite a few genres and probably made our way through the majority of my most read genres at this point. I'll link the playlist if you want to see fantasy, sci-fi, horror, literary fiction, romance, classics, etc. They're all there for you. But when I recently shared a poll asking you all what you wanted to see next, mystery and thriller won by quite a bit. We're definitely now getting into the genres that I don't read from quite as often, so I don't have as much to choose from. This definitely started with romance last time, but mystery and thriller is kind of a similar situation. I would say that I read more mystery and thriller and dark academia, but mystery and thriller is definitely in the same vein, not something I read quite as often, though I do read more mystery and thriller than I do romance, so technically there are more books to choose from, but I do tend to struggle with finding books that are classified predominantly as mystery or thriller that I give 5 stars. So this was a bit of a challenge, and that is the reason why I've combined mystery and thriller and also dark academia into one video, because I just didn't have enough 5-star reads, or even really enough 5 and 4-star reads in each of these genres to separate them into their own videos. I do think that mystery and thriller tend to be sort of nebulous genres, and what makes something mystery versus a thriller can be a bit muddy in the middle there. So there are quite a few books that I think can kind of count as both, or different people would interpret them differently. And then dark academia is less a genre than a vibe, but I do feel like dark academia tends to lend itself to this darker, more mysterious vibe. So I felt like these fit together well in a single video. Hopefully you don't mind that I've combined them. Though, of course, as with all my favorites videos, I would love to know your favorites. So feel free to recommend me your favorite thrillers and mysteries and dark academia reads. Maybe eventually I'll be able to do an updated version of this video where I will have enough favorites to split these into 3 separate videos. So that's the plan. And just like all the genres in this series so far, there will be a bonus video with even more recommendations. So if you want the bonus video, you can either become a member of this YouTube channel, the link is in the description box, or you can join my Patreon at any of the 4 paid tiers. Either of those methods will get you access to all of the bonus videos for every single one of my favorites that I've made so far and will make in the future, as long as you stay a member or a patron. So do that if you want even more recommendations. And without further ado, let's talk about my favorite mystery, thriller, and dark academia books. Starting with number 10 on my list, we have The One by John Marrs. This was my first John Marrs read and the only one that I can say I actually enjoyed, but I did really enjoy this one. This one is one of the most traditional thriller picks on this list. It is a sci-fi thriller, and it's looking at a near future where a company has developed this genetic matching technology to essentially tell you who your perfect partner is, who your soulmate is, and that causes, you know, some chaos. We don't follow one specific protagonist through this book. We switch perspectives quite frequently to follow a variety of people who are meeting their matches and having very different reactions, different experiences, a variety of consequences from meeting their perfect match. This is definitely one of those thrillers where you just are taken along for the ride. And while it is exploring some thematic content in this one, ideas of ethics in science and what true love means, and do soulmates exist? And if so, what makes someone your soulmate? Love, fate, free will versus destiny or determinism. And it's definitely thrilling, fast-paced, can be violent and intense. It very much has that traditional thriller pacing and vibe to it. And I really enjoyed reading this one more than I expected to going into it, to be honest. I found both the science really interesting, such a fascinating concept to explore, but I also just felt the pacing was perfectly delivered and I was along for the ride and it was very intense. I did read this years ago, so who knows how I would rate it these days. And like I said, I've read some more John Marrs since then and I've not had a good time. So who knows? But when I read this, I had a great time with it, and I would definitely recommend if you're looking for more of a traditional thriller. Next up, number 9 on my list is also a thriller, and that is Devolution by Max Brooks. We're dealing with people who are trapped in the aftermath of a volcanic eruption and are being attacked by a community of Sasquatch. And that sounds absolutely ridiculous. And it kind of is, but honestly, I really liked this. I thought it was kind of terrifying. I don't think I've ever read any Sasquatch fiction. ever in my life. But I just thought the pacing of this was so great. The tension, because there's not only tension of, people being afraid of the Sasquatch, but also tension between these people who are trapped together, and people under pressure don't always react very well. And sometimes in a situation like this, other humans and their unpredictability under pressure can be the greatest danger. But we also have issues of, being trapped in an isolated community, running out of resources over time. I read this years ago, so some of the details are fuzzy, but I believe this is told through a series of journal entries, if I'm remembering correctly. And I just remember starting it kind of on a whim, hoping for something pretty easy to get through that would be kind of exciting and thrilling. And I thought Sasquatch fiction sounded kind of fun. And I remember just being so pulled in, so engaged, immersed from beginning to end, heart pumping, exciting, a fun time. So again, if you're looking for that kind of traditional thriller vibe and you're interested in checking out what that could look like with Sasquatch, check it out. I thought it was fun. I had a good time with it. Next up, number 8 on my list is definitely more of a mystery, but it does have a little bit of a speculative element to it, and that is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. I kind of feel bad for this book because it came out around the same time as The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and I feel like a lot of people got them mixed up and meant to be reading Evelyn Hugo and picked up this book instead, and it was not at all what they expected, and so they didn't like it and they gave up. It was just, bad timing, 2 titles that were too similar, even though the books are polar opposites. But I remember reading these around the same time. I enjoyed both of them for completely different reasons. So The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, like I said, is definitely more of a mystery, but it does have a speculative twist to it. It does have some wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff going on, which Whovians know is always a good time. And this one is set in the early 20th century in this English manor, and we're following our protagonist who has to solve a murder by reliving a day over and over again through different people's perspectives. And I really loved this one. I had so much fun with it. Again, a super immersive, engaging experience. I don't read a huge amount of traditional mystery, sort of whodunit mystery, but when I do like to pretend that I'm an old-timey detective and try to solve the murder before it's revealed to us. I honestly can't remember if I figured this one out ahead of time, and it's been so long since I've read it now that I probably have forgotten enough that when I start reading, it won't immediately come back to me. So I might have to reread this soon and see if I can solve the murder. Because I just have so much fun with that. But I would definitely recommend this one if that premise sounds fun to you, if you enjoy historical fiction, mystery, and sort of whodunit mysteries. I just remember, again, like the others on this list so far, just having a really fun time with this one, getting through it so fast, being really engaged, and having a grand old time. So I would recommend. Number 7 on my list is another mystery, and this one is a classic mystery by the great Agatha Christie, and that is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. We actually read this for my book club, and we tried to solve it. We read a couple chapters at a time, and then would kind of check in with each other and have our theories and try to figure out who the murderer was. And some of our book club members had already read this, so they were just observing without giving any hints, and they had a great time watching us theorize when they already knew what was coming. It was so much fun. It definitely made even more fun by reading it as a group and all trying to theorize and solve it together, but I had a great time with this one. This was my second Agatha Christie I've also read, and then There Were None, but I definitely preferred this one. I'm actually going to be reading another Agatha Christie probably later this week, Murder on the Orient Express, because that is our book club pick for this month. So we'll see if that one ousts Roger Ackroyd as my favorite Christie so far, but I assume if you are a fan of mystery, you've already been reading some Agatha Christie because she is, ubiquitous in the genre. But if you haven't, I would highly recommend this one, especially if you haven't been spoiled for what happens in this book and who the murderer is, because it is great fun. I would definitely recommend this one. And speaking of Agatha Christie, if you have read more of her than I have, which I feel like most people on the planet have since I've only read 2 of her books, let me know your favorites in the comments, because I would love to read more of her mysteries, but honestly, I'm a bit overwhelmed by just the sheer number of them that there are, that I'm not really sure where to start. And so far I've been mostly picking them up at random and when we pick them for the book club. So let me know your favorite Christie recommendations. I feel like I'm working my way through her absolutely most famous mysteries, but I feel like there have to be so many diamonds in the rough in her huge body of work. So let me know. But I would recommend, if you haven't read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, lots of fun. especially if you want to try to solve it. Next up on my list, number 6, is a bit of a mix of mystery and thriller. It's a Nordic noir, a police procedural. So they're solving a mystery, but it has a bit more of a thriller tone to it, I suppose. And that is The Tenant by Katrine Engberg. And this was my first foray into Nordic noir. I did read one more book from this series, which I didn't love quite as much as this first one. And I would love to read more. I know at the time that I read this first book, only a few had been translated into English, but I'm sure more of them have been translated since. But I had a great time with this. The really dark, sort of moody noir aesthetic of it all, with trying to solve a mystery and putting the pieces together and having a bit of that thriller kind of tense danger at the same time. It was a really nice mix, and I enjoyed the protagonists, the detectives, quite a bit in this story. I found them very complex and maybe morally gray at times, or not totally likable. They felt very realistic, but I still was rooting for them, and I was interested in following them and learning more about them as people, as well as kind of going along for the journey as they tried to solve this crime. And it's set in Denmark. It is, part of this specific subgenre that is Nordic noir. I feel like I'm going to say this about all of these, but I had a really fun time with this one. It's another one that is fast-paced, engaging, immersive, has that kind of dark, spooky tone. It's a bit creepier, maybe, than some of the other ones on this list, but I would recommend, if you haven't tried any Nordic noir, or if you have, but you haven't tried this author yet, check out The Tenant. And if you are more of a Nordic noir connoisseur than I am, I would love more recommendations down below. I'm definitely going to keep reading more from this author, but I feel like there has to be a wealth of options out there. Maybe they're not translated into English, but if they are, I want to read them. Or French, that's also an option. Next, number 5 on my list is kind of hard to classify, to be honest. I feel like every time I think about this book or want to talk about this book or recommend it, I change my mind about what genre to categorize it as. It definitely feels like dark academia to me, and so that is why I feel it for sure fits in this video. But it's kind of hard to say. I don't know. I feel like different people are going to feel differently about what this book is. It is a very weird book, and for some people that's a negative, but for me that is pretty much always a positive. And I loved this one, even though it's definitely a bit of a controversial pick that lots of people seemed to hate when it came out. And that is Catherine House by Elisabeth Thomas. And our protagonist is admitted to this prestigious college, but there's something weird going on, and the more time she spends there, the more she starts to question what's happening around her and discover things that make her suspicious, and she's trying to untangle this situation while also, being of an age where she's kind of trying to come to terms with who she is and assert her own identity and figure out her place in the world. I think part of why a lot of people don't like this book is our protagonist is not super likable. She's pretty depressed for most of this book. She's dealing with some trauma. She doesn't always cope in a very healthy way. I definitely understand why people could not enjoy following her story necessarily, because again, she's not the most likable character ever. I found her really fascinating to follow. I just thought she was so nuanced and complicated and realistic and messy, and I kind of loved following her through this story. I felt she made for such an interesting protagonist and really a great window into this strange, kind of uncanny world. And we're kind of slowly teasing apart the mystery, trying to dig through the uncanniness of this school along with our protagonist. And I thought this was the perfect amount of weird. It has a very hazy, dreamlike quality to it, which is something I just love in the books I read. You'll probably not be 100% sure what's happening and what's real at various points. So if you don't like that, this is probably not for you. But if you do, I would say if you're a fan of something like Bunny by Mona Awad, which is sort of a bonus recommendation here. I did already talk about it in my horror favorites video, but if you like Bunny by Mona Awad, I think you'll like Catherine House by Elisabeth Thomas. They have very similar vibes, and the vibes are immaculate. Next up, number 4 on my list. Honestly, I really went back and forth so many times over which one I wanted to make my number 4 and which one I wanted to make my number 3. Honestly, all 4 of these in my top 4 are amazing, and I would highly recommend them all, and they're all so close, and I love them for different reasons, so just keep that in mind. So anyway, this next one on my list is, again, sort of nebulous and hard to define genre-wise. I would say it's sort of a literary thriller with dark academia vibes to it, kinda. It's hard to define. I do think it fits pretty neatly into the conventions of dark academia if you're a fan of the genre, even though most of the book does not actually take place at this college. Our two protagonists do meet at college, and a lot of their discussions are very much in that realm of sort of pretentious college students philosophizing, which I love. But most of the storyline does actually take place outside of school, and there is a bit of a thriller, danger, violent, darkness quality to it. Anyway, all that preamble, and I haven't said what the book is yet. It's These Violent Delights by Micah Nemerever, and we're following our two protagonists who are two college-age teenage boys who are sort of on the cusp of manhood, who meet and develop this pretty unhealthy codependent friendship that then blossoms into a romance, and their relationship is very complicated and toxic, and they love each other, but they're both dealing with their own trauma, and they sort of feed into each other, feed each other's demons in an unhealthy way, and things escalate pretty significantly as the book continues. My favorite things about this book, other than the dark academia sort of pretentious philosophizing vibe, which I just eat up, I love it so much. But also in this case, I just feel like the characters are so incredibly unique and fascinating. This relationship is so toxic, but it doesn't feel toxic in a extreme or caricature fictionalized sort of way. As much as it is extreme and they do go to extremes, it feels like a very sort of natural progression of two wounded, very young men who are not getting maybe the support they need, healthy support systems for what they're going through, and again, sort of reinforce and create this really unhealthy feedback loop for each other where they kind of egg each other on and push each other into even more unhealthy coping mechanisms and patterns. And while they really care about each other, they are not good for each other, and both sort of self-destructive, and together they are self-destructive and destructive of the other. And I just found it absolutely fascinating to follow the development of their relationship. It went in directions that I did not expect from the beginning. I was kind of shocked by where the characters developed to and where the plot went. Could just spend ages breaking down and analyzing both of the protagonists, but also their relationship and their relationship dynamic. It's so interesting to me. This is one of those books that I thought about so deeply while reading and took such extensive notes while I was reading. And then when I finished it, I just felt like it had altered my brain chemistry. Like, just look at these notes. What is wrong with me? This whole page is my handwriting. Like, I finished a chapter and wrote a whole other page of text and then had to add more post-its because I had more thoughts and feelings. It's just, anyways, if you're a fan of dark academia, psychological thriller, very messy, toxic people being messy and toxic together, I would recommend. I think this is a very interesting book. And I honestly think, not that it's terrible, but I feel like this cover doesn't do this book justice. I feel like you need to imagine a different cover for this book, because I think it's a lot more literary and a lot more complex in its themes than this cover is delivering. Theme-wise, there's a lot in grief and loss and trauma and healing and obsession, codependency, self-destruction. It's so interesting. There's so many fascinating intellectual debates, and the writing is beautiful. Gorgeous prose. Highly recommend. Next up, number 3 on my list is another one that is often touted as a favorite in the dark academia subgenre category, which is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I love this for so many reasons. Not the least that we are following characters who are in college. They're in theater school, specifically studying Shakespearean acting. And I have a theater degree, and I also grew up going to Shakespearean plays with my parents on a yearly basis at the Stratford Festival in Ontario, here in Canada. I've been a fan of Shakespeare for as long as I can remember. I loved how many moments there were in this book where characters would randomly quote long passages of Shakespeare. It fed my soul. But I also loved how dark this book was, how unsettling it was. It really has such a tense atmosphere, and you really don't know who to trust when one of these college students is found dead. They're kind of a codependent group, similar to These Violent Delights. There's some comparable toxic dynamics, though none of them are explored in quite as much detail. but it very much resonated with my experience of being at theater school, which can be a very codependent, toxic feedback loop of people who spend way too much time together and are not only, I'm sure this applies to other college programs too, depending on how competitive they are, but especially in acting programs, I think there's a huge amount of competitiveness and resentment between people, as well as these people being your closest friends and or lovers, but also fighting for every role, and just that constant pitting against each other in competition is palpable here. And I just loved it. Obviously not super similar to my experience because luckily no one was murdered while I was at theater school, but reminded me of a lot of aspects of being at theater school, and was again just so immersive. That really dark, super tense atmosphere, engaging, fast-paced, lovely writing, lots of iambic pentameter for your heart to flutter to. If you haven't read If We Were Villains and you're a fan of dark academia, or you're wanting to give it a try, highly recommend. Now we've made it to my top 2 reads. So number 2 on my list is literary fiction, but it definitely has a mystery or thriller spice to it. It has that dark quality, that dark atmosphere, and we do have a bit of a mystery to solve. And that is Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. And honestly, I don't even remember why I picked this up, but I was immersed to a whole other level when I read this book. I started it and then I could not put it down until I finished. I loved the writing. I loved the protagonist, such an interesting, eccentric, amazing character to follow. I loved her. I also loved the setting. It's set in Poland in the winter, and it has a very austere, frigid, sort of deadened quality that you get from reading fiction set in a cold place in the middle of winter where everything's blanketed in snow. I feel like I can relate as a Canadian. It can be very comforting and feel very cozy, but it can also have this sort of menacing quality to it where, you know, if you go outside after the first snow and everything is just too silent, and every step you take crunching through the snow feels like it's too loud and just echoes in the silence. And there can be something very unsettling about that isolation. And I loved this. I thought the writing was gorgeous. I was so intrigued by the mystery, thriller sort of elements of it. Basically, we're following this protagonist, Janina, I believe her name was, and she's this eccentric older woman, and she's investigating this series of murders in her small community that she thinks are connected to some animal killings that have been happening. Maybe retribution for these animal killings. And the protagonist is kind of reclusive and disconnected from her community. She lives a pretty isolated existence. I thought this was fantastic. It absolutely blew me away. I think it's beautifully written. Again, that sense of place, the atmosphere is fantastic. It has a really intense, sort of oppressive weight to it that I just loved. It really adds to that tension. And I loved following this older protagonist who at one point reaches out to the police for help, and they just completely dismiss her because she's an older woman and they think that her concerns are silly and don't take her seriously. And I just thought this was great. It was so good. I would highly recommend. I have been trying to capture that feeling again. I tried reading Flights by the same author and I couldn't quite get through it, but I was listening to the audiobook from my library. So I think I might need to switch to a physical copy or an ebook. I think I have to read it with my eyeballs, but maybe that one just isn't quite for me. But I did also pick up one of her other books, The Books of Jacob, which is on my shelf back here, and it's massive. So I've been intimidated to start, but maybe this video is my reminder of how much I absolutely loved Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. And maybe that'll be enough to convince me that I should dive in to another one of her works because this was so fantastic. Highly, highly, highly recommend. Moving on to number 1 on my list, which again is a bit more nebulous. It's sort of literary fiction with a bit of a thriller vibe to it, but it definitely is dark academia. Many people cite this book as the originator of dark academia. You've probably definitely heard of this one, and that is The Secret History by Donna Tart. I have not read anything else by Donna Tart, mostly because I'm afraid that nothing else that she's written could ever live up to how much I love this book. I feel like this book is very hit or miss for people because we are following a group of protagonists who are all incredibly unlikable. They're all terrible people. They're terrible to each other. They don't have great morals. They make really awful decisions. They're also super pretentious. Constantly and always, but I loved them for that. It was so entertaining for me. These are kids at this elite, prestigious university, and they are in this ancient Greek program, and it's this special program where only the select few participate. It's a class of like 6 people. They're studying with this very, reclusive and celebrated and intimidating professor, and they definitely feel above anyone else at this college. Even though everyone at this college is probably rich and very smart, they don't care. They are the cream of the crop, and they're very insular. It's set in the 80s in Vermont. It definitely has that vibe to it. It feels very of its time, sort of a time capsule. And we're following our protagonist, Richard, who is joining this program and trying to find his place in this group. And they are, especially at the beginning, very uninterested in making room for him. And we kind of get to see them through his eyes as an outsider as he slowly integrates into the group. And there may or may not be a murder that we are aware of from the start and have to slowly figure out how and why this happened. And it's pretty tense, especially once we get to the ending. It does have almost a thriller sort of feeling to it in the pacing and the stakes. But for most of the book, up until the ending, I would say it has a very slow pace. It very much languishes in the atmosphere and the vibes, and I loved that. I loved the explorations of morality and good versus evil and groupthink and obsession and almost a cult-like quality to this group of kids who, again, kind of like we get in If We Were Villains or in These Violent Delights, we get this very codependent, toxic feedback loop of destruction, and also teasing apart these ideas of classism and elitism. And these characters are deeply pretentious, but it's almost satirical in the way that it portrays them. I love this. I really love this book. I know lots of people are not a fan, and I would say if you're not someone who is fascinated by really complex, well-developed, unlikable, morally bankrupt characters, you might not enjoy this because there's really no one to root for. But I found it fascinating. It's like a psychological study of these kids who have way too much money and way too much confidence at their young age and are given the tools to do some pretty horrific things and aren't really subject to any checks and balances that would be helpful for them. So anyway, I would recommend The Secret History if you haven't checked it out, especially, again, if you're interested in dark academia. This is largely considered to be the genesis, the beginning, the birth of dark academia. Let me know if any of Donna Tartt's other books are worth reading, because like I said, I've been kind of hesitant to read anything else and ruin this perfect moment in time that was this book for me. I'd be curious. And of course, now that we've made it to the end of my list, please let me know all of your recommendations for mystery, thriller, dark academia. What should I check out? Classics, more contemporary releases. What are your favorites? Let me know. And of course, if you've read any of these, let me know your thoughts. Do you like them as much as I did? Were you not a fan whatsoever of some of these books? I would love to hear your thoughts. And of course, again, if you're looking for even more recommendations, you can check out the bonus video available for my channel members and my patrons. And with that, I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.